This is one of my favorite books. It's written by Patricia Polacco, and she wrote The Trees of the Dancing Goats. It's a beautiful book. Here's the title page. The Trees of the Dancing Goats, Patricia Polacco. So these people, background, are from Russia, and you can see that they're Jewish. There's the menorah. At our farm, just outside Union City, Michigan, we didn't celebrate the same holidays as most of our neighbors, but we shared their delight and anticipation of them just the same. Such cold the winter brings, my babushka said as she looked out our front window. My bones, it makes me ache. She slapped her chest. Then she caught my eye and she winked. She wasn't fooling me. I knew how much she loved the snow. It reminded her of her homeland in the Ukraine. Carly, again you complain, but still you watch the snow with such light in your eyes, Grandpa said. And he threw her a kiss. My grandfather was from Soviet Georgia, way to the south of Russia. He and Babushka spoke Russian and had wonderful accents. They kept their homelands in their hearts, even though they would never, ever be permitted to return. Just then, Mama rolled into the long driveway. Mama's home! Mama's home! My brother Richard called as we watched her get out of the car. Mama drove way over to Battle Creek every day to teach school. But now she would be off for the next 2 weeks because of the holiday season. I loved having her home for winter vacation. This year, we would have a week together to prepare, and then 8 days and nights of Hanukkah festivities. The next day, Mama took out our old, tarnished menorah and asked me to polish it. Got to polish it every year. While I rubbed, I watched my grandmother make the candles that we would put in. Babushka tied long strings to a metal rod and dipped them into a pot of melted beeswax that she kept on the stove. Then she hung the wax-covered strings on the wall to dry before dipping them again to add another layer of wax. She hummed as she dipped, never seeming to tire of the process. Now, Grandpa prepared for our festival of lights as well. He carved small toys out of wood. Richard and I weren't supposed to know that he was making them for us. But he did every year, and that afternoon, when we went to town, we couldn't help sneaking into his workroom to take a little peek. Look, it's a dancing goat, my brother exclaimed as he held one up. Ooh, I like this one. I was cradling a little dog in my palm. Grandpa had painted the animals with colors from his homeland. We marveled at how magical they all were. Do you think he made enough for all 8 days and nights of Hanukkah? Richard asked as he eyed the array of wooden figures. You know that he has. I took one lasting look, knowing that soon Grandpa would wrap them all up in beautiful colored paper. My mother called for me, and I thought she had caught us spying, but she only wanted me to go over to the Kremls for some cornmeal. The Kremls were our nearest neighbors. They lived half a mile down the road. They were farmers like us, and at harvest time, Mr. Kreml always helped Grandpa. All the neighbors helped each other that way. Friendship means something, Grandpa always said, especially for those who till the soil, who work really hard on their own land. I practically lived at the Kreml's house because Cherry Kreml was my very, very best friend. We especially loved the holiday season. When I'd watch her family decorate their Christmas tree and she'd watch my family light our menorah, I knew as we were bustling in anticipation of the Festival of Lights at our house, the Kremls would be preparing for the arrival of Christmas at their house. But when I got there, I found everybody was quite sick. Even Cherry, who was usually just full of herself, as my babushka would say, she seemed quiet. She seemed weak. She was crying. I hope Santa is going to remember where we live. Well, why wouldn't he? I asked. Because we don't have a tree this year. We don't even get to decorate. Papa's too sick to get out of bed and go chop one down. Then she was coughing this most awful cough. I felt so bad for her, and she looked so terrible, so sick. I ran all the way home, and I burst into our house with the news about Cherry and her family. Mama seemed very worried. Did you go inside that house, Tricia? She asked me. Yeah, sure I did, I answered. Uh-oh, my brother said. They all looked at each other. When your grandfather was in town today, Babushka said very slowly, Dr. Leach told him that many families around here have come down with scarlet fever. Uh-oh. The Kremls must have it. And I sent you there, my mother said as she rushed me to the bathroom. She pulled off all my clothes and soundly scrubbed every inch of me. Mama, am I going to get it? Am I going to get it? I asked. It's very contagious, she answered. We're going to know in a few days. Am I going to die? I asked. I was starting to cry. No, baby, Mama said softly as she held me close. But if you have it, it will make you very sick. For the next few days, my family watched me carefully. Richard, my brother, of course, took pleasure in making me feel like I was quarantined. What brothers do. He held the cloth over his mouth and nose every time he came near me. Then he'd cough and he'd gag, and he was mimicking the dreadful cough of the fever. Brothers. As the days passed, it was evident that I was not going to get sick. But more and more reports came to us of our neighbors falling ill. Well, there were the Everests and the Govlocks and the Tundervalds and the Moleskis. It was most certainly an epidemic. We were all worried about our friends, but Babushka was determined that our Festival of Lights would go on as planned. On the afternoon before Hanukkah, she bustled around her kitchen. Such latkes I'll make this year, she exclaimed, while digging for the choicest potatoes in the bin. She hummed happily as she placed the potatoes in front of me. I shredded them with great care. They had to be just right for my Babushka's latkes. Mama and Babushka dressed down 2 chickens for roasting and put them in the oven. Just as the aroma of the wonderful feast met our nostrils, the sun set, and it was time to light the menorah. Grandpa recited the blessings and lit the shamus, the leader candle, the candle used to light all the other candles. Babushka put the first candle in the menorah and lit it with the shamus. Then Mama told a story, as she did every year, of our people long ago. Tonight, we are celebrating miracles, she started. The miracle that a very small band of Jewish farmers turned soldiers could defeat a huge Syrian army. Were there really farmers before there were soldiers? Richard asked. Yes, simple farmers, just like us. They were fighting so that they could worship in their own way, my mother added. Then there was the miracle of light, my grandfather said with a twinkle in his eye. 1 little tiny drop of oil burned in the temple for 8 days and nights. Such a miracle, my babushka exclaimed. Miracles can happen even today, Grandpa said quietly. After dinner, Grandpa handed us the first of our beautifully wrapped presents. He looked troubled, though. You know, he began, our neighbors are having such a hard time. And this should be a time of gladness for them. If only we could do something to make their holiday special. Babushka thought for a while. They always bring a tree into their house. Only in America does a tree grow right out of the living room floor. She rocked with laughter. Carly, we should cut down trees and take them to their houses, Grandpa announced. Babushka smiled in agreement. I'll cut them down tonight. You can help, Richard, Grandpa said, already pulling on his winter coat. We can dress down more chickens and take them food, Babushka said as she scurried into the kitchen. Mama and I can decorate the trees, I shouted delightedly. But this is not our custom. We have nothing to decorate the trees with, my grandmother said. What about the carvings? Said Mom. They both looked at me. What do you think? They have no way of making their children happy this year. At first, I was a little disappointed, but then I thought about it. I knew it was the right thing to do. Our neighbors needed cheering, and we were just about the only ones who did not have the fever. Grandpa and Richard brought the cut trees into our living room. They nailed boards onto the bottom of each one so that each tree could stand up. They were very small trees. Grandpa had only taken the tops of our evergreens, but they were beautiful, and they were all standing in the living room. And when they were there, it looked like a forest. Like the woods just outside of Kiev when I was a little girl, Babushka said breathlessly. Grandpa started hanging some of the wooden animals on the branches of the tree. A dancing goat, my Babushka remarked as she looked closely at one of them. We shall call these the trees of the dancing goats. We made sure to hang a dancing goat on each and every tree. As we decorated the trees, we sang and we laughed. The single candle in the menorah flickered as we rushed past it to reach another carved animal or to paste together the paper chains to put around the trees. We all worked into the night. It took a long time. While Grandpa, Richard, and I finished decorating, Babushka and Mama roasted more chickens, and we fried more potato latkes. They packed the food into the baskets, and each one Babushka put in one of her homemade Hanukkah candles. So they will have the light of God in their hearts, and so that God will protect them and make them well again, she said. We loaded Grandpa's old Ford with the trees and the food baskets and sent Babushka and Grandpa into the early light of dawn with their Christmas cheer. Just like Santa, my brother said. Mr. and Mrs. Santa, I added. We waited eagerly for their return later that morning. We were thrilled when Babushka and Grandpa told us of how they entered the home of each neighbor, set up a tree in the living room, put the basket of food on the table, and then put a candle in a holder for them to light later. Mama was a little worried that they'd been exposed to the fever, but Babushka said, in so much worse I've seen, and I've been. You shouldn't know from. God will protect. God will protect. This I know. A week later, the 8 days of Hanukkah had come and gone, and we sat down to have our last feast. There was a knock at the door. Now, who could that be? Babushka said as she scurried to the door with her usual warm smile. It was the Kremls. Cherry, and her mom and her dad. They looked pale, but assured us that they felt so much better now. "We have something for you," Cherry announced as she bolted through the door holding a basket. Her mother and father had tears in their eyes as they hugged my grandparents and hugged my mother. "Look what my dad made for you," Cherry said. She pulled out a menorah that Mr. Kimmel had carved out of wood. On it, he had mounted some of the animals that we had given to them. Oh, here's the menorah with some of the carved animals. "How beautiful," my babushka said as she placed it on our table. "Come sit," Grandpa invited them. "You are so welcome." "Thank you, thank you." "Thank you, George," Mr. Crummell said, looking into Grandpa's eyes. They sat down and shared our feast. By this time, our menorah had been lit for an hour or so, and when we lit the candles in the new menorah, we noticed something wondrous. "Look," I called out. "Our old candles are exactly as tall as the new ones. The old ones don't even look burned down," Mama said softly. "It's another miracle." "A miracle indeed," my babushka said, giving me a big hug. Then we all got up and danced and laughed together in the flickering candlelight. Our neighbors all recovered from that terrible fever. Few were left with any permanent damage. What they were left with was a long cherished memory of that Christmas when Santa really did come. And my family, too, has never forgotten that incredible winter of the fever, the miracle of true friendship, and the trees of the dancing goats.